I remember the exact day my life started to feel like it was tilting on its axis again. It was a Wednesday morning, and I was folding laundry, humming a song I hadn't sung in years. The sun was streaming through my kitchen window, catching the dust on the sill in golden streaks. My phone buzzed across the counter, and I saw Leela's name light up the screen. Leela, my little sister. Always full of surprises, full of energy, full of drama. And somehow full of charm that I could never quite resist. "Hey," she chirped when I answered. "You're not going to believe this?" I paused, folding a shirt. "Try me. I got engaged," she said, and I could hear her voice vibrating with excitement. "And you're going to be my maid of honor." I froze, a t-shirt dangling from my hands. My first instinct was disbelief. Me, maid of honor. The woman who had spent the last 5 years recovering from a divorce, burying herself in work, and avoiding all social drama. Wow, I said, laughing. "Are you serious?" "Yes. Dead serious," she replied. "You're my sister. You're the one I trust to stand by me, to be there in every moment." Her words wrapped around me like a warm blanket. For a moment, I felt a rush of something I hadn't felt in years. Pride, excitement, connection. We spent the next hour on the phone, her describing the proposal, the ring, the wedding venue she had in mind. Lila had chosen a charming little Italian restaurant downtown for the engagement dinner. One I knew would feel intimate, romantic, and slightly over the top in the best way possible. As she spoke, I noticed my hands shaking slightly. It wasn't just excitement. It was a strange nagging feeling in my chest. Something that told me this wouldn't be ordinary. She sent me a photo. Later that day, her and Ryan, the man she was going to marry. He had dark hair, a kind smile, and an easy charm. And yet, when I looked at him, I felt a flicker of recognition. But from where? I shrugged it off. I hadn't met that many people. Surely I was imagining it. For the next week, my phone was buzzing constantly with Pinterest links, screenshots of dresses, color schemes, and Lila's endless excitement. I found myself caught up in it, letting her joy infect me, while the gnawing feeling of familiarity grew stronger every time. I saw Ryan's face. The engagement dinner arrived sooner than I expected. It was a warm evening, spring just beginning to tease the city with its fragrance. I arrived a few minutes late, carrying a bottle of wine I had carefully chosen. I walked into the restaurant, my heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Candles flickered on each table, casting soft shadows on the walls. Lila was glowing, her eyes sparkling like I hadn't seen in years. And then I saw him, Ryan, standing next to her, tall, confident, handsome. With a smile that made my stomach flip in ways I hadn't felt in years. I froze for a second. There was no denying it anymore. The face, the jawline, the faint scar near his temple, it was him. The man I had met 7 years ago in a hotel bar on a night when I was broken and alone. The night I hadn't even wanted to be around anyone, but had ended up talking to a stranger who listened to every word I said, who made me feel seen in a way no one else had. My heart started racing, but I forced myself to smile. I had to. He extended his hand with a charming smile. "You must be the famous big sister," he said. "Lila talks about you all the time." "Nice to meet you," I said, shaking his hand, trying to steady my voice. Inside, everything was spinning. Dinner passed in a blur. I tried to focus on Leela, on her happiness, on her laugh that always reminded me of sunny days in our childhood backyard. But every time I glanced at Ryan, memories came rushing back uninvited. The way he listened when I cried, the way his hand had brushed mine over a shared drink, the warmth of his presence. After dessert, I excused myself, saying I had to make a quick call. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection, didn't recognize the woman looking back. Was I jealous? Was I scared? Was I angry? Or was it just shock? Returning to the table, I tried to settle, but the tension had built too high. His casual charm as he helped Lila into her coat felt like salt in an old wound. I couldn't stop myself from remembering that night. That man, that impossible connection that should have ended years ago. When I got home, sleep was impossible. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the evening over and over. Could I be wrong? Maybe it was just someone who looked like him. Maybe my brain was trying to punish me for something I didn't even understand. I found myself scrolling through social media, looking at every photo of him and Lila together. The more I saw, the more a quiet alarm grew inside me. Subtle comments from other women, small inconsistencies in his past locations. Little glimpses that made my skin crawl. I told myself I was being paranoid. I didn't want to believe it, but there was no denying it. My past had collided with my present in a way I couldn't ignore. A week later, his name appeared on my phone. "Ryan, I need to talk to you," he said. My heart sank. "About what?" I asked. "About the past," he said softly. We met at a cafe near my office. He arrived early, coffee half finished, eyes darting nervously around. "I didn't know she was your sister," he started. "Not when I met Leela, does she know?" I asked. "No," he said, "and I don't want it to come out." "So your plan is to marry her while keeping this secret," I said, my voice tight. "It was years ago," he said. It meant nothing to him, perhaps. But to me, it had been a night that had defined part of who I was, who I had been, and who I had feared becoming. I stood, my hands trembling. "You don't get to decide what means nothing," I said. He reached for my hand, quiet, pleading. "Please don't ruin this for her. She's happy." "Let's just leave the past alone." I pulled back. "You love her? She deserves the truth." He said nothing, and I left. Sitting in my car afterward, I gripped the steering wheel, feeling the weight of what I now carried. Anger, fear, guilt, all mingled inside me, twisting and turning until I couldn't tell which was which. But one thing was certain. I couldn't let Lila walk blindfolded into a marriage built on secrets. Not if I could help it, and with that thought, a plan began to form. The morning after that cafe meeting, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. Sunlight spilled across the bedroom, but it offered no comfort. My mind kept replaying Ryan's words, his calm insistence that the past meant nothing. And I felt my stomach twist in anger and fear. How could someone so familiar and yet so dangerous to the ones I loved be hiding in plain sight? I went about my day mechanically, making coffee, checking emails, and glancing at my phone too often. Every notification made me jump. Was it him or Lila, or just some irrelevant alert? But I couldn't ignore it. I knew I had to understand who Ryan really was before Lila's wedding day drew closer. I started with small things. Social media, of course, became my first battlefield. I combed through photos, dates, captions, tags, and comments. Every happy couple post was a thread in a web I was determined to unravel. There were inconsistencies, places he claimed to have been that didn't match what Lila had told me. Subtle mentions of women I didn't recognize. But I recognized the patterns from 7 years ago. My gut screamed. He wasn't the man she thought he was. The next day, I drove to the cafe where Ryan and I had met. I needed to retrace steps, see him in places where he'd felt comfortable. See what kind of man he was when he wasn't in front of Lila. I ordered a coffee, sat at a corner table, and waited, though I knew he wasn't coming. I watched couples laugh, young professionals pace with laptops open, a child tugging at his mother's hand. And I thought back to that night 7 years ago, how he had been kind, attentive, gentle. How I had let myself feel something I wasn't ready to feel. And now he was trying to marry my sister without even a hint of accountability. I couldn't let him get away with it. Not this time. Lila deserved honesty, even if it shattered the picture-perfect image she had of Ryan. I started making notes. Dates, places, patterns, phone numbers from old emails. Photos from 7 years ago that Ryan had been tagged in, ones that now seemed significant. I began reaching out subtly to people from his past, pretending to be curious about mutual events or gatherings. It wasn't long before I had a partial picture. Ryan had a history of disappearing from lives. leaving people confused and hurt, moving on as if nothing had happened. And yet to Leela, he was flawless. That night, I called my best friend Jenna. I knew she'd be honest and I needed someone on my side. She listened quietly as I explained, voice shaking at times. Rage simmering beneath my words. Deep breath, she said finally, "You're not crazy. You're protecting your sister. But you have to be careful. You can't just confront her fiancé without proof. You'll look paranoid and you might lose her trust." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She was right. I had to find proof. Solid proof. Something undeniable. Something that would make Lila understand without twisting the truth in the wrong direction. The next days became a careful investigation. I tracked Ryan's past jobs, checking LinkedIn profiles. I contacted a few colleagues pretending to catch up. Most confirmed my suspicions he had a habit of charming women, making connections and then disappearing when things got serious. My hands shook as I wrote everything down, creating a timeline that matched too closely with Leela's past months. Meanwhile, Lila was blissfully unaware, buzzing with excitement over flower arrangements and dress fittings. Every time she called, I smiled and feigned excitement, keeping my growing anxiety hidden. I had to. I couldn't let her suspect. Not yet. One evening, I received a text from Ryan. Just a casual message. "Want to grab coffee tomorrow? Need to talk." My stomach twisted. I knew exactly what he wanted to smooth things over before I could expose him. But I agreed. I had to see him one more time. See if I could catch him in something concrete. Something he couldn't deny. The next day, we met in a quiet park. He arrived with that same calm smile, unaware that I had prepared every question, every observation, every point of confrontation. We walked along the trail, leaves crunching under our feet, birds chirping in the distance. "I know you've been looking into me," he said casually, as if reading my mind. I stopped, heart racing. "I've been trying to protect my sister," I said firmly. "I need to know who you really are." He looked at me, something flickering in his eyes, a hint of fear, maybe guilt. "I told you, it was years ago. Nothing happened. I love Lila and I would never hurt her. Would you say that if you were lying?" I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady. He paused, and for a split second, I saw the mask slip. A small flicker of panic crossed his face. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You've done this before. You've moved from life to life, leaving people behind. My sister doesn't deserve that. And I won't let her walk blindfolded into your lies." He laughed nervously, running a hand through his hair. "You're overreacting. I've changed." I didn't believe him. I couldn't. I needed proof. And I realized something crucial. If I wanted the truth, I couldn't just rely on conversations. I had to dig deeper. That night, I contacted a private investigator I had known years ago. Someone discreet, thorough, and reliable. I explained everything, gave him the timeline, the photos, the inconsistencies, and my gut feeling that Ryan was hiding something big. A few days later, the investigator called. "Got results," he said. "Meet me." We met at a small diner near my house. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were receipts, emails, travel records, all tracing Ryan's movements. His interactions with other women, patterns that he had carefully hidden from Lila. There were gaps, lies, moments where he had presented one story publicly but had completely different events privately. I felt a mix of vindication and dread. I had known it. I had known he wasn't the man Leela believed him to be. But seeing the proof, holding it in my hands, made the task ahead terrifying. I drove home that night, gripping the folder tightly. My hands shook. The weight of responsibility pressed down on me. I had to tell Lila. I had to protect her. But I also had to do it in a way she would hear without destroying her completely. For the first time in days, I let myself breathe. I wasn't just reacting to memories and feelings anymore. I had evidence. I had a plan. And for my sister, I would see it through to the end, no matter how hard it got. The next morning, I woke with a knot in my stomach that refused to loosen. The folder from the investigator sat on the kitchen table like a weight pressing down on me, each paper inside a reminder of the truth I couldn't ignore. Lila deserved to know. I deserved to know I had tried everything to protect her. And Ryan. Well, he was about to learn that the past doesn't stay buried. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the table, tracing the lines of every receipt, every email, every documented movement of his that contradicted the stories he told Lila. The more I read, the angrier I became, not at my sister, but at Ryan. He was clever, charming, and manipulative, leaving a trail of confusion in his wake. He thought he could charm his way into a happy life while hiding the shadows behind him. By late morning, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I picked up the phone and called Lila. I had rehearsed what I would say 100 times in my head. But now that her voice answered on the line, it all evaporated. "Hey sis," I started. "Morning, you sound serious. Everything okay?" Kay, she asked, a little laughter in her voice. "I need to talk to you. In person," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause. "Is this about the wedding?" "Yeah, it's about Ryan," I said. My words sounded heavy even to me. "Okay, I'll come over," she said, and hung up. When she arrived, I offered her coffee and gestured for her to sit. I watched her, her eyes bright, her hair freshly styled, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. I took a deep breath. I hired someone to help me. "To find out more about Ryan," I said, finally breaking the silence. Her brow furrowed, curiosity and worry mixing in her expression. "What do you mean?" she asked, leaning forward. "I know you love him," I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "And I don't want to hurt you, but I discovered things about his past that you deserve to know." Lila's hands trembled slightly. "What things?" I slid the folder across the table. She picked it up, flipping through receipts, emails, and photographs. Her expression shifted from curiosity to disbelief to anger. "He lied," I said softly. "He's not who you think he is. Hidden things from you about relationships, about his past, about women he's been involved with." Lila's eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand." "How could he? He seemed so perfect." "People can seem perfect," I said, voice breaking a little. "But perfection is a mask. You need to see him for who he truly is." She set the folder down, stunned. I watched her, my heart aching for her, because I knew this wasn't just information, it was a heartbreak in progress. But I also knew that revealing the truth now could save her from a lifetime of regret. "We need to confront him," said finally, "together." Her hands shook as she nodded. "Okay, let's do this." The confrontation was arranged for the following evening at her apartment. Ryan arrived looking confident, as if nothing could touch him. I noticed how he glanced at me briefly, a flicker of recognition in his eyes, before turning his full attention to Lila. She stood in the middle of the room, holding the folder like a shield. "Ryan," she said, voice steady but trembling slightly. "We need to talk." He laughed nervously. "Talk about what?" I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "About the things he's hidden," I said. "The things you have a right to know." Ryan's eyes flicked between us. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, voice low. Lila opened the folder and laid it on the table. "All of this. Receipts, emails, records everything." "Explain." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Ryan's charming mask faltered. I saw hesitation, a flicker of fear. He tried to deflect to charm his way out, but we didn't let him. "You can't talk your way out of this," I said firmly. "You've hidden the truth from her for too long. She deserves to know everything before she makes any decisions." Lila's eyes were wide, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Why, Ryan, why didn't you tell me?" He swallowed hard. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it didn't matter anymore." "It matters," she said, voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "It matters to me, to my life, to my choices." I watched as he faltered, realizing that his control over the situation was slipping. For the first time, he wasn't charming, wasn't confident. It was exposed, vulnerable. You're not the man I thought you were, Leela said finally, turning to me. Thank you for showing me the truth. I nodded, relief washing over me. But there was still the matter of Ryan. He looked at us, defeated, and I knew he realized this would change everything. I love you, he said, voice breaking. I didn't mean to hurt you. Lila shook her head. Love isn't enough when trust is broken. You made your choices. He left soon after, the weight of his lies finally catching up to him. For the first time, I saw the power of truth, of courage, standing up for someone you love. Lila and I sat in silence for a while after he left. The folder lay between us, a testament to the choices we make and the consequences we face. I don't know what I would have done without you, she said finally, leaning into me. You'd have been okay, I said softly. But sometimes people need a little help to see clearly. We spent the rest of the evening talking about the future, about healing, about rebuilding trust not in Ryan, but in ourselves, in the choices we make and in the lives we still have to live. And as I held her hand, I realized that this was what mattered, standing up for what was right, even when it was painful, even when it was messy. Justice isn't always about punishment, it's about truth, empowerment, and freedom.
The morning after Ryan left, the apartment was quiet in a way that felt almost unnatural. Lila sat at the kitchen table, cup of coffee in hand, staring at the folder I had brought home from the investigator. I could tell she was thinking about everything, what had been, what she had believed, and what she would do now. I still can't believe he lied to me for so long, she said finally, her voice trembling but strong. How could I not have seen it? You didn't know, I said gently. And he made sure you wouldn't. That's the point. But now you do. And that means you can make choices that actually protect yourself. She nodded slowly, absorbing my words. The raw anger in her eyes softened into something else, a resolve, a determination. I could see it building, layer by layer, like sunlight piercing through clouds after a storm. Over the next few days, we focused on rebuilding. Not just the pieces of her life that Ryan had tainted with his lies, but the emotional scaffolding that allowed her to feel safe again. We went out for walks, visited her favorite cafes, and spent hours talking about everything that had happened. For the first time, she let herself cry freely, and I let her. I held her hand and listened, reminding her that her pain was valid, her anger justified, and her strength undeniable. I watched her reconnect with friends who had been quietly concerned for months. They hugged her, shared stories of Ryan's charming but inconsistent behavior, and expressed relief that she had someone like me by her side. I realized then that our bond had grown deeper through all this. Not just sisters, but allies, protectors of one another in a world that could be cruel and deceiving. Meanwhile, I continued my quiet investigation, because even though Ryan was gone from her immediate life, I needed to make sure he wouldn't try to manipulate the situation again. I dug through every detail I could find, confirming patterns, connecting dots. He had left a trail of emotional wreckage behind him, and I wanted to make sure Lila's life wouldn't be the next. It wasn't easy. Nights were sleepless, and I often found myself lost in memories of my own past mistakes. But every time I looked at Lila, I knew the effort was worth it. I had a responsibility, not just as a sister, but as a woman who had learned the hard way about trust, betrayal, and the value of standing up for what is right. A week later, Lila and I met with a counselor she had been seeing since the initial confrontation. We talked about boundaries, self-respect, and the importance of choosing relationships based on truth, not charm. The session was emotional. Lila cried openly about the life she thought she had, and I sat there holding her hand, feeling the weight of both of our pasts and the lightness of the future we were beginning to build. I feel free, she said at one point, wiping her eyes, like a weight has been lifted even though it hurts. That's the truth, I said. Freedom is never painless, but it's always worth it. The next step was confrontation with Ryan, but not in anger, not in fear. This time it was about final closure. Lila wanted to speak for herself, to let him see the strength she had found. I accompanied her, silently standing as a shield and support. We arranged to meet at a neutral location, a small park we both knew, quiet and away from prying eyes. When Ryan arrived, his usual calm confidence was absent. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Lila," he started, voice hesitant. "I didn't mean to hurt you." She looked at him steadily, her chin high, eyes fierce with determination. "You did," she said. "And now you need to leave that behind. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with your manipulation. You cannot be a part of my life anymore." His face fell. I could almost feel the realization dawning that the consequences of his actions had finally caught up with him. He tried to speak, but she held up her hand. "No, save your excuses. I am choosing truth. I am choosing myself." And in that moment, something shifted. Ryan understood that charm and deception could no longer carry him through life. There would be no more manipulations, no more hidden truths. Lila had found her voice, and I had helped her protect it. After he left, Lila turned to me, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she smiled genuinely. It wasn't forced, it wasn't nervous, it was a smile of someone who had reclaimed control over her life. "I couldn't have done this without you," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "You had the strength all along," I said softly. "I just reminded you how to see it." We spent the evening reflecting, talking about the lessons learned and the boundaries now firmly in place. We laughed, we cried, and we planned a future unshadowed by lies. Lila even joked about planning her own wedding in a way that honored herself, not anyone else's expectations. And for the first time, I felt a sense of empowerment that went beyond protecting my sister. I had faced difficult truths, confronted manipulation, and helped someone I loved reclaim their life. And in doing so, I had reclaimed a piece of myself I didn't even know was lost. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new rhythm. Lila focused on her career, friendships, and personal growth. She explored hobbies she had neglected, reconnected with old friends, and spent time reflecting on what she truly wanted from life. I watched her bloom, knowing that the storm had cleared and she was finally free. I also focused on myself. I revisited parts of my past I had buried, reconnected with friends I had lost touch with, and allowed myself to dream again. I realized that helping Lila had given me a roadmap to my own empowerment, a way to stand tall, to recognize truth, and to demand respect in all areas of life. One evening, as we sat together on her balcony watching the sunset, she turned to me. "Do you ever regret stepping in?" she asked softly. "Never," I said. "Because sometimes the hardest truths bring the greatest freedom. And I wanted you to have that freedom." We sat in silence, letting the last rays of sunlight fill the space around us. I knew the past would always be a part of our story, but it no longer had power over us. The lies had been confronted, the manipulations exposed, and the emotional bonds between us had grown stronger than ever. And as I looked at my sister, I realized something profound. Justice isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about truth, clarity, and the courage to reclaim your life. And in that moment, both of us had done exactly that. The weeks that followed Ryan's departure felt strangely liberating. Lila had started to reclaim her life with an energy I hadn't seen in her before. Every morning she would rise with purpose, a sense of clarity guiding her steps. Her laughter returned, not the brittle kind that masks unease, but a genuine, full-bodied joy that reminded me of who she had always been before deception shadowed her days. We had settled into a routine that felt grounding. I spent time at her apartment, helping her organize her home, our shared laughter echoing against freshly cleaned walls. Small gestures, a cup of coffee on a slow morning, a reminder about self-care, or simply being there to listen, became pillars for her healing. Each conversation reinforced what we already knew. The power of truth can be painful, but it leaves room for strength to flourish. Lila began attending therapy regularly, something I quietly encouraged. In those sessions, she confronted not only the hurt Ryan had caused, but also the ways she had second-guessed herself. She admitted her tendency to trust too quickly, to overlook subtle red flags, and to hope for the best in people. And yet, she also discovered resilience, a capability to face betrayal and still stand upright. For me, watching her grow was a lesson in reflection. I thought about my own journey, my divorce, the nights I had spent crying alone, the moments I had doubted my own worth. Helping Lila wasn't just about protecting her. It was about reclaiming my sense of agency. Every step she took toward healing mirrored a path I had once walked but hadn't fully embraced. One afternoon, Lila and I went shopping, not for wedding dresses or decorations, but for items that symbolized her independence. She picked out a bright red coat, something bold and unapologetic, and I could see the transformation taking hold with each decision she made. In a world where Ryan's lies had sought to diminish her, she was now choosing herself, her confidence radiating like sunlight. But empowerment wasn't solely about rebuilding. It was also about addressing unresolved feelings. Lila admitted to me one evening, quietly, that despite everything, a part of her missed what she thought Ryan represented, the charming, attentive partner she had envisioned. I nodded, acknowledging that grief and loss often mingle with relief. "You loved what you thought he could be," I said gently. "But now you see the truth, and that's more important than any illusion." She smiled faintly, appreciating the clarity even if it stung. "I guess I needed to lose him to find myself," she said, voice barely above a whisper. As she healed, we also began focusing on our bond as sisters. Our evenings together became rituals of storytelling, sharing memories from our childhood, laughing at old mistakes, and acknowledging the resilience that had carried us through countless storms. It was in these moments I realized that the strongest support is not always about intervening or correcting, but about standing beside someone as they reclaim their life. Work began to occupy me differently. I felt a renewed drive to pursue projects I had shelved for years. Even simple tasks, like organizing my own home or reconnecting with old friends, were infused with a newfound purpose. I discovered that when you help someone navigate betrayal, you often illuminate your own path toward empowerment. Meanwhile, Lila was slowly stepping into social events with confidence. She reconnected with colleagues, attended art exhibitions, and even started volunteering at a local community center. Each outing reinforced her independence and reminded her, and me, that life continues after heartbreak. The sense of freedom she now carried was palpable, her decisions guided by self-respect rather than fear of loss or shame. A turning point came when we received an invitation to a local charity gala. It was the first event Lila attended since Ryan, and she wanted me by her side. We spent the evening dressed elegantly, our laughter mingling with the soft music in the grand hall. As we mingled, I noticed how women and men alike responded to her newfound confidence. She was no longer defined by someone else's deceit. She had become her own definition of grace, strength, and joy. During the event, a friend approached us, curious about the story behind our recent struggles. Lila spoke candidly, not dwelling on the pain but focusing on her journey of self-discovery. People were inspired, not by her past suffering, but by her courage to confront the truth and embrace a life guided by authenticity. That night, as we left the gala, the city lights reflecting off the pavement, Lila turned to me with a serene smile. "I feel powerful," she said simply. "You are," I replied, squeezing her hand. "And don't ever forget it." As weeks turned into months, life slowly stabilized. Lila pursued new hobbies, painting, yoga, and even joining a book club. Each activity reinforced her independence and sense of identity, reminding her that she was capable of joy without relying on validation from anyone else. At home, I continued reflecting on the lessons learned. The past is never completely gone, but confronting it, seeking justice, and embracing truth transforms pain into empowerment. I realized that the experience had changed me too. I was no longer just a sister protecting another. I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, and my strength. One afternoon, while sipping tea on Lila's balcony, we watched the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was streaked with shades of pink and gold, a canvas of possibilities. "Do you ever think about what could have happened if I hadn't stepped in?" Lila asked, her voice contemplative. I shook my head. "I don't think about could have been. I think about what is. Right now, you're standing tall, and that's what matters. You found yourself, and no one can take that away." She leaned back, a sense of peace settling over her face. "Thank you for never letting me settle for lies," she whispered. "And thank you for trusting me to help you see the truth," I replied. It was in that quiet moment, bathed in the fading light of the day, that I realized the true essence of justice. It isn't revenge. It isn't punishment. It is clarity, empowerment, and the courage to embrace life on your own terms. For Lila, for me, for anyone who has faced betrayal or deceit, the path forward is always guided by honesty, self-respect, and resilience. And in that understanding, we found freedom, not just from Ryan, but from the shadows that had once loomed over our lives. The morning after that dinner sat heavy in my bones. I woke before the sun, the room still wrapped in blue shadows, and for a moment I forgot why my chest hurt so much. Then the memory returned. The way Michael's eyes had looked when he saw me, the flash of panic he tried to hide, and the awful, polite smile that followed. I moved quietly through the house, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table staring at the steam. My hands shook when I lifted the mug. I'd spent half the night trying to convince myself it was just coincidence. Maybe he only looked like that man. Maybe my memory was wrong. But the truth had a weight I couldn't ignore. He wasn't just a face from my past. He was the man who had nearly broken me years ago. The man I thought I'd never see again. Back then, I'd been working in finance, mid-level management, single mom, juggling bills and self-respect. He'd been charming, older, confident in a way that drew everyone in. When the scandal broke at the firm, money missing, accounts falsified, he was the first to point fingers. And I was the easiest target. I lost my job, my reputation, and nearly my home before the truth came out that he'd been the one orchestrating everything. By the time the investigation caught up, he'd disappeared. I never learned what happened to him until now, and now, he was standing next to my baby sister, smiling, holding her hand, wearing the same smooth mask he'd worn back then. I spent the next 2 hours walking circles in my yard, phone in hand, wondering what to do. Telling Sarah outright would sound insane. "Hey, your fiancé is the man who framed me for embezzlement a decade ago." That's not exactly a conversation you start over brunch. But I couldn't just stand by and let her marry him. When I finally went inside, my phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. "Morning. Hope you're okay after last night. Michael said you seemed quiet. He really wants to make a good impression. Can you come dress shopping with me later?" I stared at her text, my heart thudding. I typed, "Sure, what time?" Maybe that was cowardice. Maybe it was strategy. I told myself I needed to learn more before I made a move. That afternoon, we drove to a boutique downtown. Sarah hummed along to the radio, radiant with that newly engaged glow that made me ache. She talked about the floral arrangements, the menu, the playlist, while I sat there trying to hide that every time she said his name, my stomach turned. Inside the shop, I zipped her into gown after gown. Lace, satin, silk. She looked like she'd stepped out of a dream. And between fittings, she told me how Michael had been a blessing. "He listens to me, Em," she said softly, smoothing the fabric over her hips. I've never felt so seen. I bit my lip. That was exactly how he'd made me feel once. After she'd found her dress, she twirled in front of the mirror, beaming. "You love it, right?" I nodded. "It's perfect." But my throat burned with a truth I couldn't say. That night, I sat with my old laptop. The screen flickered, slow and stubborn, but it still held old emails I hadn't touched in years. I searched his name. I found the internal memos, the complaint letters, the copy of the final report, Michael L. Grant. Fraud. falsified documents. Disappeared before sentencing. I scrolled until my eyes blurred, but one thing stopped me cold. A scanned image of his old driver's license. The date of birth matched the man my sister was about to marry. There was no mistake. I leaned back in my chair, whispering, "You bastard." The next morning, I went to see my friend Denise. She'd been my rock back then, one of the few who believed me when the scandal hit. She worked at the courthouse now, buried in case files and caffeine. When she saw me walk in, she smiled, then frowned. "You look like hell, Emily." "I found him," I said. Her eyes widened. "Who?" "Michael Grant. He's engaged to my sister." She sat back slowly. "No way!" I told her everything. Her face shifted from disbelief to fury. "He's using a new name?" I nodded. "Michael Reynolds. He's cleaned up, changed his story, and now he's about to marry into my family." Denise leaned forward. "You need proof. Real proof. Or she'll think you're jealous or bitter." "I know," I whispered. "Can you help me?" She hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Give me a day. That night I barely slept." I kept seeing Sarah's face, the way she looked at him, full of faith. I couldn't stand the thought of her walking down that aisle into a trap. When Denise called the next morning, her tone was clipped. "Meet me at the diner in 20. I drove fast. She slid a folder across the booth. Inside were printouts, legal documents, a warrant from years back, sealed testimony. "He cut a deal," she said. "Cooperated enough to dodge prison. Changed his name legally after that." My fingers trembled. "So he's free. For now," she said. "But he's not supposed to leave the state without notifying the court." "He's been traveling with Sarah," I murmured. "Florida last month." Denise exhaled. "That's violation territory. If you want justice, this might be your chance." I stared out the window. Justice isn't enough. I need her safe. That evening, I went to Sarah's apartment. She was cooking something simple, pasta and wine. When she saw me at the door, she smiled. "You okay?" "You've been weird lately," I forced a laugh. "Just tired." "Can we talk?" "Of course." We sat on her couch. The TV flickered silently in the background. "Sarah," I said carefully, "how much do you really know about Michael's past?" She blinked. "Enough. He told me he had some rough years after his business failed." "Why?" "Because," I said, my throat tightening, "I knew him before you did." "And he's not who he says he is." Her smile faded. "Emily, what are you talking about?" I handed her the folder Denise had given me. She didn't open it right away. "You're making a mistake," she said quietly. "Michael isn't that man. He's kind. He loves me." "Open it," I whispered. She hesitated, then flipped through the papers. Her fingers slowed. Her face drained of color. "Where did you get this?" "Court records," I said. "It's all public. He changed his name after a fraud case. That's why he looks familiar to me." She shook her head. "No, that can't be right. I wish it wasn't." We sat in silence for a long time. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking clock. Finally, she whispered, "He told me his ex ruined him. Said she lied." "That's what he said about me," I said. She looked up sharply. "Yeah," I continued. "He blamed me. Said I stole from the company. I lost everything because of him." Her lip trembled. "He wouldn't do that again. People change." "Some do," I said gently. "He doesn't." Half an hour later, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen, then silenced it. "It's him," she murmured. "Let it go to voicemail," I said. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. When she finally listened to the message, his tone was smooth, casual, rehearsed. "Hey babe, just checking in. Hope your sister's not filling your head with old stories. She's always had a flair for drama." Her jaw clenched. I whispered, "You hear that?" "He's already spinning it." Sarah wiped her face. "What do we do?" I looked at her and felt something shift inside me. Resolve, maybe, or the ghost of the fight I thought I'd lost years ago. "We do what he never expects," I said. "We expose him." That night, Sarah stayed at my place. She couldn't face going home, not with his things scattered around her apartment. She sat at my kitchen counter, knees pulled up, clutching a mug of tea she never drank. I watched her stare into nothing, her whole world tilting on its axis. "I feel so stupid," she said finally. "Don't," I told her softly. "He's a professional liar." "I fell for it too," she laughed bitterly. "I used to brag about him, Em. Said I'd finally found someone steady, someone safe. He even helped me pick out Mom's nursing chair. He said family meant everything to him." I reached across the counter and squeezed her hand. "That's how he works. He builds trust brick by brick until you can't see the trap anymore." She swallowed hard. "What if he tries to hurt you or me?" "He won't," I said, though my stomach nodded at the thought. "Because we'll stay one step ahead. I'd been powerless once. I wasn't going to be again." The next morning, while Sarah slept in the guest room, I went to my car and called Denise. "He's still in town," I said. "We need to prove he's violating his probation. I can pull the travel logs," she said. "And maybe we can get someone to confirm he's been using aliases for work. That would nail it." "Do it?" I said. I hung up and sat there for a minute, heart racing. The morning light poured through the windshield, warm but unforgiving. I thought of all those nights years ago when I'd begged someone to believe me. No one had. I wouldn't let Sarah go through that same disbelief. By noon, Denise texted, "Got something. Meet at my office." She was waiting with a printout. "You were right," she said. "He's been flying under two names. Michael Reynolds for personal life, Michael L. Grant for business. Same passport number, same face." I stared at the page, a mix of fury and grim satisfaction tightening in my chest. "This is enough, right?" She nodded. "More than enough. But Emily, you should be careful. When people like him feel cornered, they lash out." I managed a small smile. "Then he'll learn I'm not the same woman he left broken." When Sarah woke, I told her what we had. Her face hardened. "I want to see him. Are you sure?" She nodded. "He deserves to hear it from me." And I deserved to say it. We agreed to meet him in a public place, safe, crowded. The cafe near the river seemed right. When he walked in, that familiar confidence preceded him, like a shadow. He spotted Sarah first, then me. His smile faltered just slightly, but he covered it fast. "Ladies," he said smoothly, "this feels like an ambush." Sarah's voice shook but didn't break. "Why didn't you tell me who you really are?" He blinked. "What?" "Michael Grant," she said. "Fraud, embezzlement, identity change. Sound familiar?" He chuckled, low and dismissive. "Sweetheart, you've been reading nonsense. Emily's always had a grudge." "Stop," Sarah cut in, her voice rising. "Don't call me sweetheart." The cafe went quiet around us. He glanced at me, eyes narrowing. "You think this fixes what you lost? Dragging my name through the dirt again?" "I'm not dragging anything," I said evenly. "I'm showing her who you really are." He leaned closer, voice low. "You don't know what you're playing with, Emily." "Oh, I do," I said. This time I came prepared. I pulled my phone from my purse, opened the file Denise had given me, and set it on the table. His photo, his real name, his court record, all there. He froze. For a long, tense moment, he said nothing. Then he pushed back his chair, stood, and muttered, "You two deserve each other." As he walked out, Sarah trembled. Tears slid down her cheeks, but they weren't just from heartbreak. They were from clarity. I reached over, touching her arm. "It's over," she nodded slowly. "No," she said, straightening. "Not until everyone knows what he did." Over the next few days, we worked quietly but deliberately. Denise helped us file a report with the probation office. Sarah contacted the wedding planner and canceled everything, every deposit, every vendor. Then she posted a short, dignified message on her social media. Sometimes the truth shows up late, but when it does, it saves you. The wedding is off. Thank you for your love and understanding. The responses poured in, sympathy, shock, confusion. But through it all, Sarah stayed calm. I was proud of her. She'd found her voice faster than I ever had. Then, 3 days later, Denise called again. "You'll want to sit down for this." She sent me a link. Local news headline, Former fraud suspect arrested for probation violation. My heart pounded as I read the article. They'd caught him trying to board a flight under his old alias. The same charm that once fooled everyone had finally turned useless. When I told Sarah, she went silent, then whispered, "It's done? It's done." We sat together on my porch that night, the air soft and heavy with summer. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Em," she said quietly. I kept thinking, maybe I'm not meant for love. First Mark cheated, now this? What if I'm just broken? I turned to her. You're not broken. You just trusted people who didn't deserve you. That's not a flaw. That's proof you've still got hope. She smiled faintly. You sound like Mom. I laughed softly. Maybe I finally get what she meant about storms making strong roots. We sat there a long time watching the sky fade to pink. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace settling in. 2 months later, Sarah started therapy. She began painting again, something she hadn't done since college. She even signed up for a local art show. As for me, I met with Denise one last time to close the loop on the report. He'll probably serve time, she said. But more importantly, the record's clear now. You're officially exonerated from the old case. My throat tightened. You're serious? She smiled. It's all wiped. You're free. I walked out of that courthouse lighter than air. For years, I'd carried guilt that didn't belong to me. Now it was gone. That evening, Sarah and I opened a bottle of wine. She toasted, eyes glistening. To new beginnings, I clinked her glass. And to endings that finally make sense. We both laughed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the laughter didn't have any bitterness hiding behind it. The wedding dress hung in her closet for weeks before she donated it. One Saturday, she called me from the thrift store parking lot. You know, she said, I thought giving this away would hurt. But it feels good. Like closing a book I don't need anymore. I smiled. That's exactly what it is. You're not erasing the story. You're just writing the next chapter. She paused. And you, Em? What's your next chapter? I looked around my quiet house, the flowers on the porch blooming wild and unbothered. I think I'll finally stop living in the past, I said. Maybe start that small business I always talked about. Something honest. Something mine. You'll do great, she said. You always do. We hung up, and I sat there smiling at the sunlight spilling through the window. Justice had taken its time, but it had arrived. And not the angry, vengeful kind. The kind that restores what was lost. Dignity, trust, peace. A few months later, Sarah met someone new. Not a whirlwind romance, just a quiet friendship that grew at its own pace. A teacher, kind eyes, patient heart. I liked him instantly. When she told me she was thinking about going on a second date, I teased, "No background checks this time?" She laughed. Already ran one. That laughter. It was the sound of healing. Sometimes I still think about Michael, about how close he came to ruining us both. But mostly I think about how he failed. Because no matter how clever his lies were, truth outlasted them. It always does. And when I look at Sarah now, stronger, steadier, unafraid, I know this wasn't just about catching a liar. It was about reclaiming our voices. I close this chapter with one simple thought that I wish I'd understood years ago. Justice isn't revenge. It's the quiet peace of knowing you survived the fire and came out standing taller. And that's exactly what we did. The summer sunlight poured through my windows like a promise. After the chaos with Michael, life felt slower, deeper, richer in ways I hadn't allowed myself to notice for years. Sarah had found her footing, and I was finally stepping into my own. It wasn't dramatic. There were no sudden breakthroughs, no Hollywood-style montages. Just quiet, persistent progress, the kind that seeps into your bones and reminds you that healing isn't always loud. I spent my mornings at home, sipping coffee on the balcony, writing in my journal. My handwriting, once shaky and hesitant, now flowed freely. The ink felt like freedom as I recounted our journey, each word a small testament to survival, resilience, and the power of truth. Some days, I would catch a reflection of myself in the window, a woman older than I remembered, but undeniably stronger. Lines on my face told the story of battles fought and won. My eyes, once tired from sleepless nights and worry, now held a quiet fire. I liked the person I was becoming. Sarah had started her art classes again, and the community center became her second home. Watching her interact with the children reminded me so much of myself at that age. Curious, eager to learn, desperate to create something that mattered. She laughed more than she had in years, her joy infectious. I realized I had been holding my breath, waiting for someone else to rescue me, while she had quietly rebuilt herself on her own terms. One evening, she called me, voice trembling with excitement. You have to see this. My first gallery show in a decade. People love my work. I dropped everything and went to see her. The gallery was small but vibrant, a mix of colors and textures that reflected her journey. Soft blues of reflection, fiery reds of determination, subtle greens of growth. She walked me through each piece, explaining the story behind it. Some were joyful, some painful, but all unmistakably hers. "You've really done it," I said, eyes moist. "Every piece tells who you are now." She smiled. "And it feels good." "Really good." I hugged her tightly. "I'm proud of you, more than I can say." That night, after the gallery, we walked through the city streets. Lights glimmered off the wet pavement from a recent rain, and the air was alive with possibility. Sarah held my hand, her grip firm, steady. She said quietly, "I don't know how I would have gotten through all this without you." I shook my head. "You got through it because you're stronger than you think. I just helped you remember it." We stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench beneath the shadow of a large oak tree. The branches stretched out above us like arms, protective and unwavering. "I never thought I'd trust someone again," she whispered, staring at the city skyline. "But now, I feel like maybe it's okay to try." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "And when you do, you'll know the difference between someone who's honest and someone who's not. You won't settle for less than you deserve." Her eyes shone. "I won't, I promise." In the weeks that followed, our lives settled into a rhythm. I began working on the small business I had dreamed about for years, a home-based consulting firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every client, every project felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I had thought lost. Sarah and I spent hours brainstorming together, designing marketing materials, planning budgets. I loved seeing her enthusiasm. It reminded me that growth wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving. One Saturday, she called me with a laugh. I think I've met someone special." My heart lurched for a moment, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Tell me about him." "He's kind," she said. "Patient, funny. He makes me feel like I can be myself." I smiled. "That's exactly what you need." "He even helped me paint one of my canvases," she added. I chuckled. "You're really falling for him, aren't you?" "Maybe," she admitted, "but it feels different this time. I'm not rushing. I'm not scared." That night, I sat in my office, reflecting. Watching Sarah find happiness again without losing herself was one of the most beautiful lessons I'd ever learned. Love, I realized, wasn't about losing control. It was about finding someone who made your life brighter without dimming your own light. Then, the unexpected happened. One afternoon, as I was packing orders for my consulting clients, a familiar car pulled up outside my house. My heart skipped a beat as the door opened. It wasn't Michael, thankfully, but someone else from my past, someone I hadn't seen in over a decade, Alex. Alex had been my first mentor in the corporate world, the person who believed in me when no one else did. We had lost touch after I left the company under Michael's shadow. Seeing him now, older but kind-eyed and calm, felt like a bridge between my past struggles and my present strength. "Emily," he said, voice steady, "I heard about what happened. I wanted to check in." I invited him inside, and we sat over tea, talking late into the afternoon. He listened to my story without interruption, nodding, acknowledging, never minimizing the pain. When I finished, he said, "You were brave to face that, and stronger for surviving it." I realized then how far I'd come, not just in protecting Sarah, but in reclaiming my own life. I hadn't just survived Michael's lies. I had rebuilt myself, stronger and wiser. That summer, Sarah's new relationship blossomed slowly. They went to museums, local plays, and quiet dinners. She introduced him to me cautiously, and I watched from a distance as she laughed without fear, smiled without hesitation. The sight of her lightened, unguarded joy was a balm for all the years of stress and betrayal we had endured. Meanwhile, my consulting firm began to pick up momentum. Every successful project, every satisfied client, reminded me that persistence pays off, and that justice doesn't always come from the courts. It comes from living well, honestly, and boldly. One evening, Sarah and I walked through the farmer's market downtown. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the stalls. She paused at a stand selling handmade pottery and held up a small, delicate vase. "This," she said, "reminds me of everything we've survived. Fragile but strong." I nodded. "And it's beautiful." She handed it to me as a gift. "For you, Em, for always being there." I took it carefully, cradling it in my hands. "Thank you. But really, this is ours, both of us." We carried each other through. Later that night, I sat on my porch with a glass of wine, reflecting. It had been a long journey. Betrayal, fear, heartbreak, and finally, redemption. The hardest moments had taught me the most profound truths. Trust must be earned. Love must be chosen carefully. And strength isn't just about resisting. It's about rising, again and again, no matter how many times life knocks you down. I looked at the stars above, each one distant but burning brightly. For years I had felt lost in the darkness, unsure if I would ever find my way. But now, surrounded by love, resilience, and the knowledge that I had faced the worst and survived, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The phone rang. It was Sarah. "Em," she said, voice soft but excited. "I just realized I've never been happier. Not just because of him, because of everything we've been through. We're alive, we're free, and we finally get to be ourselves." I smiled, warmth flooding me. "Exactly. That's what matters." We hung up, and I stayed on the porch a while longer, letting the night settle around me. There was a sense of completion, not finality, but understanding. Life was a story, sometimes cruel, sometimes kind, but always ours to navigate. And for the first time in years, I felt fully present in it, ready for the next chapter. The next few months were transformative. Sarah's relationship deepened slowly but surely. She introduced me to him properly, and for the first time, I felt confident that she had someone who respected and loved her for all that she was. There was no deception, no manipulation, only honesty and care. I continued building my firm, hiring a few trusted people, mentoring young professionals, and embracing opportunities I would have once shied away from. I realized that life's victories aren't always loud. They're in the quiet moments of recognition, the small successes, and the knowledge that we survived. And then, one crisp autumn afternoon, Sarah and I sat together on the porch, looking at the map of our future adventures. She held my hand, and I held hers, both of us acknowledging the strength we had built together, the lessons we had learned, and the paths we were about to take. For the first time, I truly understood that the fire we'd endured hadn't destroyed us. It had shaped us, strengthened us, and guided us toward a life worth living. A life where justice, truth, and love coexist. Autumn settled like a soft blanket over the city. The The leaves turned amber and gold, drifting lazily down the sidewalks as if signaling change was both inevitable and beautiful. After the tumultuous months following Michael's exposure, Sarah and I had found our rhythm. The trauma that had once dominated our lives had not disappeared, but it had softened into lessons and clarity. Each morning, the sunlight through my windows reminded me how much space we had reclaimed, how much life we were finally free to inhabit. I spent hours walking through the local park, letting the crisp air fill my lungs. The rustle of fallen leaves underfoot felt grounding, almost like a ritual I needed to remind myself that I had survived. For years, I had carried the weight of fear and anger, an invisible chain. Now, I could walk lightly, step by step, reclaiming every inch of peace I had lost. Sarah had fully embraced her new life. Her art had taken on depth and confidence that I hadn't seen before. The community center hosted her small exhibitions, and each piece she displayed drew a crowd of admirers. But what thrilled me most wasn't the recognition. It was seeing her soul reflected in the brushstrokes, her resilience, her joy, and her honesty. One evening, Sarah invited me to join her at a private dinner hosted by the Art Society. "I want you to meet someone," she said with a sparkle in her eye. "He's different, but I think you'll like him." I went, curious but guarded. The man she introduced me to was kind, attentive, and genuinely interested in her work. His questions weren't superficial, and his admiration didn't feel performative. As the evening unfolded, I noticed something I hadn't anticipated. I felt at ease. The tension I had carried around potential deceit, like a shadow waiting to pounce, was absent. Over dinner, Sarah's laughter rang through the room. It was full-bodied and genuine, no longer punctuated by caution or self-doubt. She caught my eye and smiled, and in that moment I felt my own heart lighten. This was what I had fought for, not revenge, not fear, not dominance over the past, but freedom to breathe, to choose happiness again. Back at home that night, I reflected on how far we had come. Michael's deception had once felt like an insurmountable wall, but now it seemed more like a lesson embedded into our bones. It had forced me to rediscover my strength and my voice. Watching Sarah flourish reminded me that resilience was contagious, that the courage of one can inspire the courage of another. The next day, I began to pour even more energy into my consulting firm. I had built something small, but the demand was growing. I hired a few interns, mentoring them not just in business, but in integrity, honesty, and perseverance. Sharing my story, cautiously, selectively, with those I trusted, became a quiet form of empowerment. I realized that survival wasn't just about enduring, it was about passing lessons forward, about shaping others with your experience so that they too could navigate life's storms with grace. Then came a new challenge, subtle but profound. Sarah's former life with Michael had left financial and emotional scars that surfaced in unexpected ways. A few weeks after the gallery show, she received a notice from a creditor that Michael had used her old shared credit account for unauthorized charges. The letter arrived like an echo from the past, stirring old fears. I immediately took action. Together with Denise, we contacted legal advisors to ensure that Sarah was protected. It wasn't about retaliation. It was about safeguarding her autonomy and peace of mind. She was scared, yes, but this time she didn't crumble. She faced the letters, signed the paperwork, and stood firm. "I'm done being a victim," she said one evening, handing me a stack of documents she had reviewed. "This time I decide how my life moves forward," I smiled. "And you're doing it beautifully." That night, we celebrated in a small but meaningful way. We ordered Thai food, poured glasses of wine, and sat in the living room, letting laughter fill the space. It felt like claiming victory not with fanfare, but with quiet dignity. As autumn deepened, Sarah and I made a pact to strengthen not just our individual lives, but our sisterhood. We began setting aside time for weekly rituals, Sunday brunches, evening walks, and occasional painting sessions together. These moments were simple but profound. They reminded us that life's true richness comes not from external validation, but from connection, shared experiences, and mutual support. One brisk evening, As we walked through the tree-lined streets near my apartment, Sarah said quietly, "Em, do you think we finally healed?" I considered the question carefully. "Healing isn't a destination," I said. "It's a process. But we're living proof that it's possible." She nodded thoughtfully, taking a deep breath of the crisp air. "I'm proud of us." "Me too," I said, squeezing her hand. We walked in silence for a while, letting the crunch of leaves underfoot speak louder than words. There was peace in that quiet, a shared understanding that the storms of the past had forged not just survival, but strength, resilience, and a vision for a future we controlled. Then came a turning point, one I hadn't fully anticipated. A corporate client I had been working with invited me to speak at a small professional summit. The invitation wasn't just recognition, it was an acknowledgement of my expertise, my resilience, and my ability to guide others. Standing on that stage, speaking to a room full of aspiring professionals, I felt a surge of empowerment. Every anecdote I shared about perseverance, navigating betrayal, and reclaiming integrity was met with nods, smiles, and applause. It was more than professional validation, it was personal vindication. I realized that life doesn't always offer the dramatic courtroom or explosive confrontation that movies promise. Sometimes justice is quiet. Sometimes it's the ability to stand tall in front of others, to teach, to guide, to lead from experience. When I returned home, Sarah was waiting with a bottle of wine. "You were amazing," she said, eyes shining. "You've come so far, Em," I laughed softly. "We've both come far. You too, in every way that matters." Her smile reflected gratitude and pride, and in that moment, I felt the full weight of our shared journey. We had faced deceit, fear, and manipulation, and emerged not just unbroken, but stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace life fully. As the weeks passed, Sarah's relationship blossomed steadily. Her partner was attentive, respectful, and patient. They moved slowly, savoring each moment, each discovery about one another. I watched from a distance, heart swelling with pride. Knowing that she had learned from the past without letting it define her future. Meanwhile, I began expanding my consulting firm further, taking on mentorship roles and offering workshops in local community centers. Teaching young professionals wasn't just about business strategies. It was about resilience, empowerment, and integrity. Sharing my story cautiously and thoughtfully became a gift to others. One day, Sarah called me in excitement. "Em, I just realized something. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of love, not of failure, not of anything. I feel free." I smiled, thinking about everything we had endured. "Freedom is earned," I said. "And you've worked hard for it," she laughed. "So have you. I see it in you, in everything you do." The first snowfall of the season arrived quietly, dusting the city in white. Sarah and I bundled up and walked through the streets, our laughter echoing softly through the cold air. For the first time, our shared past felt distant rather than looming. The memories of Michael, of betrayal and fear remained, but they no longer held dominion over our present. We stopped at the park where we had walked so many times before, watching snowflakes drift lazily to the ground. I reached out, catching one on my glove. "It's beautiful," I whispered. "Like life," Sarah said softly. "Messy cold sometimes, but also full of wonder," I nodded. "Exactly. And we survived it all. We're stronger for it." We stayed in that moment for a long time, letting the quiet and cold and beauty fill us. There were no villains now, only clarity and strength, only hope, and the knowledge that we could face whatever came next. The weeks turned into months. Sarah's art continued to gain recognition, and she began collaborating with other artists in the community. Her relationship matured slowly, built on trust and mutual respect. I watched her thrive, sometimes in awe, sometimes in quiet reflection. And me? I finally launched the full scope of my consulting business. I hired 2 associates, expanded services, and began offering workshops that combined business acumen with life skills. Teaching wasn't just professional, it was personal. I realized that my past had equipped me to guide others in ways I had never imagined. Every young professional I mentored reminded me of the journey Sarah and I had survived, and the resilience we had cultivated. One evening, Sarah and I sat by the fireplace, the warmth wrapping around us like a protective cocoon. We reflected on the year, the challenges, the fears, the victories. "I used to think healing meant forgetting," she said. "But now I know it's about remembering, learning, and moving forward." "Exactly," I said. "And it's not linear. Some days feel perfect. Some days we stumble. But we keep going, and that's what matters." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Thank you, Em, for everything. For never giving up on me." I kissed the top of her head. We never gave up on each other. That's the real story. Life had taught us many things. That trust is precious, that strength is forged in the fire of adversity, and that love, real, honest love, requires courage, patience, and self-respect. Sarah and I had learned to navigate life's storms together. Spring had fully arrived, breathing life into the city. Trees blossomed in pinks and whites, and the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass. After the long winter of reflection, growth, and healing, I could finally feel the world opening up before us. There was an unspoken promise in the season, a reminder that life, when given space, always finds a way to bloom. Sarah's life had continued to evolve beautifully. Her art workshops for children were thriving, and the community recognized her talent not just as an artist, but as a mentor, a guide, and a beacon of resilience. Watching her interact with the kids, seeing her patience and encouragement, reminded me of the countless lessons she had learned about strength and compassion. She had grown, not by avoiding the past, but by using it as a foundation for something lasting and meaningful. One afternoon, Sarah and I were sorting through some old boxes of photographs and letters from our childhood. Amidst the faded pages and sepia-toned images, I stumbled upon an old journal of mine. Flipping through the pages, I found entries from years ago. Entries filled with fear, confusion, and uncertainty. I remembered the nights I had written those words, alone and unsure of the future. Reading them now, I could feel the distance between the person I was then and the woman I had become. Every word was a reminder of how far I had traveled, through pain, through betrayal, through countless sleepless nights, and how much strength had been forged in the process. Sarah looked over my shoulder, smiling gently. "You've come a long way, Em." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "We've come a long way together," she leaned into me, "and I couldn't have done it without you." A few weeks later, something unexpected arrived. A letter in the mail that carried both closure and vindication. It was from one of Michael's former clients, a business partner who had been involved in some of his schemes. They had decided to come forward with information, clarifying the extent of his deception and formally acknowledging Sarah's and my innocence. I read the letter carefully, feeling a mix of relief and triumph. Finally, there was documented proof, a testament to the truth we had been living and defending all these years. Justice, in its quiet and patient way, had arrived, not through confrontation, but through persistence, integrity, and the refusal to let lies define our lives. That evening, Sarah and I celebrated with a small dinner at home. We raised our glasses, toasting not just to the letter, but to the journey that had brought us here. "To survival," I said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "To resilience," she added, eyes shining with pride. "To the life we've reclaimed," I finished. Smiling, we clinked glasses and laughed, letting the warmth of the moment fill every corner of the room. For the first time, the past felt like a distant shadow rather than a looming presence. The next day, I received an invitation from a local business magazine to be featured in an article about women who had overcome adversity to build thriving careers. I hesitated at first, unsure if I wanted to make our story public again. But then I thought about everything we had endured and how much our experience could inspire others. I accepted. The interview was a mix of nostalgia and empowerment. I spoke about the challenges Sarah and I had faced, the betrayals we had endured, and the way we had transformed pain into purpose. I talked about mentorship, resilience, and the importance of reclaiming one's narrative. When the article was published, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Messages of support, admiration, and gratitude poured in from women all over the city, and even beyond. It was a powerful reminder that our story, though deeply personal, had universal resonance. Pain and triumph, betrayal and forgiveness, fear and empowerment. These were experiences that connected us all. Meanwhile, Sarah's relationship had reached a new stage. Her partner had proposed quietly one evening, during a simple dinner at home. He didn't need grand gestures or dramatics. He simply asked her to continue building a life together, to share love, trust, and laughter. Sarah called me immediately after, tears of joy in her voice. He asked me. I said yes. I laughed and cried at the same time. I'm so happy for you, Sarah. You deserve this happiness more than anyone I know. It feels right, she whispered. After everything, this feels real, safe, and true. I realized then that the past, with all its pain and deception, had not robbed her of joy. It had prepared her for it. It had strengthened her sense of self, sharpened her instincts, and allowed her to choose wisely. That summer, Sarah and her fiancé decided to host a small, intimate wedding. True to her nature, the event was beautiful without being extravagant. There were flowers, soft music, laughter, and tears of happiness. And I had the honor of standing beside her as her maid of honor, not just a role in name, but a symbol of the bond that had carried us through so much. As I helped her prepare that morning, adjusting her veil and smoothing her dress, I reflected on the journey that had led to this day, from betrayal and fear, to resilience and growth, to love and triumph. Every step had mattered. Every struggle had carved a path to this moment. You ready? I asked her gently, squeezing her hand. She smiled, eyes glistening. I am, because I know I'm not alone. I have you, Em, always. I felt a lump in my throat. And you have me, Sarah. Always. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and perfect in its authenticity. Vows were exchanged, promises were made, and we all celebrated the beginning of a new chapter. I watched Sarah, radiant and confident, and I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and relief. She had faced the darkest parts of her past and emerged unbroken, ready to embrace a future full of love, joy, and possibility. During the reception, I took a quiet moment to myself and reflected on my own journey. From the days of fear and uncertainty to the moments of triumph and empowerment, I realized that my life had been a series of lessons in resilience. Michael's betrayal, though painful, had pushed me to reclaim my voice, my confidence, and my sense of justice. That night, as the celebration wound down and guests departed, Sarah pulled me aside. She said softly, thank you for everything. For protecting me, guiding me, and believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I hugged her tightly. You don't need to thank me. You did all the hard work yourself. I just reminded you of your strength. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. But I couldn't have done it without you. We survived together, and now we get to live fully, without fear. I nodded, feeling a profound sense of closure. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear and every battle had led to this moment. Not just hers, but ours. In the months that followed, life settled into a harmonious rhythm. My consulting firm continued to grow. Sarah's art flourished, and her relationship strengthened into a loving, committed partnership. We continued our rituals, walks, painting, quiet dinners, nurturing not only our bond as sisters, but our own personal growth and happiness. It was in these quiet moments that I realized the true meaning of justice, empowerment, and resilience. Justice isn't always about retribution. It's about reclaiming your life and living it fully. Empowerment isn't always loud. It's in the quiet decisions, the steady progress, and the refusal to let fear dictate your path. And resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about rising over and over, stronger each time. One evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch together, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The sky was a wash of oranges, pinks, and purples, and the air smelled faintly of blooming flowers. "You know, Em," Sarah said softly, "I used to think that happiness was something that happened to other people. But now I see it's something we create, together with care, courage, and honesty." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Exactly. And we've proven that, haven't we? Through everything." She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. "We have, and I'm grateful. For life, for love, and for you." I felt a deep warmth in my chest. "And I'm grateful for you, Sarah, for your strength, your courage, and the fact that we survived it all, together." Spring had fully arrived, breathing life into the city. Trees blossomed in pinks and whites, and the air carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass. After the long winter of reflection, growth, and healing, I could finally feel the world opening up before us. There was an unspoken promise in the season, a reminder that life, when given space, always finds a way to bloom. Sarah's life had continued to evolve beautifully. Her art workshops for children were thriving, and the community recognized her talent not just as an artist, but as a mentor, a guide, and a beacon of resilience. Watching her interact with the kids, seeing her patience and encouragement, reminded me of the countless lessons she had learned about strength and compassion. She had grown, not by avoiding the past, but by using it as a foundation for something lasting and meaningful. One afternoon, Sarah and I were sorting through some old boxes of photographs and letters from our childhood. Amidst the faded pages and sepia-toned images, I stumbled upon an old journal of mine. Flipping through the pages, I found entries from years ago. Entries filled with fear, confusion, and uncertainty. I remembered the nights I had written those words, alone and unsure of the future. Reading them now, I could feel the distance between the person I was then and the woman I had become. Every word was a reminder of how far I had traveled, through pain, through betrayal, through countless sleepless nights, and how much strength had been forged in the process. Sarah looked over my shoulder, smiling gently. "You've come a long way, Em." I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "We've come a long way. Together." She leaned into me, and I couldn't have done it without you. A few weeks later, something unexpected arrived. A letter in the mail that carried both closure and vindication. It was from one of Michael's former clients, a business partner who had been involved in some of his schemes. They had decided to come forward with information, clarifying the extent of his deception and formally acknowledging Sarah's and my innocence. I read the letter carefully, feeling a mix of relief and triumph. Finally, there was documented proof, a testament to the truth we had been living and defending all these years. Justice, in its quiet and patient way, had arrived, not through confrontation but through persistence, integrity, and the refusal to let lies define our lives. That evening, Sarah and I celebrated with a small dinner at home. We raised our glasses, toasting not just to the letter, but to the journey that had brought us here. "To survival," I said, voice steady but thick with emotion. "To resilience," she added, eyes shining with pride. "To the life we've reclaimed," I finished. Smiling, we clinked glasses and laughed, letting the warmth of the moment fill every corner of the room. For the first time, the past felt like a distant shadow rather than a looming presence. The next day, I received an invitation from a local business magazine to be featured in an article about women who had overcome adversity to build thriving careers. I hesitated at first, unsure if I wanted to make our story public again. But then I thought about everything we had endured and how much our experience could inspire others. I accepted. The interview was a mix of nostalgia and empowerment. I spoke about the challenges Sarah and I had faced, the betrayals we had endured, and the way we had transformed pain into purpose. I talked about mentorship, resilience, and the importance of reclaiming one's narrative. When the article was published, the response was overwhelmingly positive. Messages of support, admiration, and gratitude poured in from women all over the city, and even beyond. It was a powerful reminder that our story, though deeply personal, had universal resonance. pain and triumph, betrayal and forgiveness, fear and empowerment. These were experiences that connected us all. Meanwhile, Sarah's relationship had reached a new stage. Her partner had proposed quietly one evening during a simple dinner at home. He didn't need grand gestures or dramatics. He simply asked her to continue building a life together, to share love, trust, and laughter. Sarah called me immediately after, tears of joy in her voice. He asked me. I said yes. I laughed and cried at the same time. I'm so happy for you, Sarah. You deserve this happiness more than anyone I know. It feels right, she whispered. After everything, this feels real, safe, and true. I realized then that the past, with all its pain and deception, had not robbed her of joy. It had prepared her for it. It had strengthened her sense of self, sharpened her instincts, and allowed her to choose wisely. That summer, Sarah and her fiancé decided to host a small, intimate wedding. True to her nature, the event was beautiful without being extravagant. There were flowers, soft music, laughter, and tears of happiness. And I had the honor of standing beside her as her maid of honor, not just a role in name, but a symbol of the bond that had carried us through so much. As I helped her prepare that morning, adjusting her veil and smoothing her dress, I reflected on the journey that had led to this day. From betrayal and fear, to resilience and growth, to love and triumph. Every step had mattered. Every struggle had carved a path to this moment. You ready? I asked her gently, squeezing her hand. She smiled, eyes glistening. I am, because I know I'm not alone. I have you, Em, always. I felt a lump in my throat. And you have me, Sarah, always. The ceremony was simple, heartfelt, and perfect in its authenticity. Vows were exchanged, promises were made, and we all celebrated the beginning of a new chapter. I watched Sarah, radiant and confident, and I felt an overwhelming sense of pride and relief. She had faced the darkest parts of her past and emerged unbroken, ready to embrace a future full of love, joy, and possibility. During the reception, I took a quiet moment to myself and reflected on my own journey. From the days of fear and uncertainty to the moments of triumph and empowerment, I realized that my life had been a series of lessons in resilience. Michael's betrayal, though painful, had pushed me to reclaim my voice, my confidence, and my sense of justice. That night, as the celebration wound down and guests departed, Sarah pulled me aside. She said softly, thank you for everything, for protecting me, guiding me, and believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. I hugged her tightly. You don't need to thank me. You did all the hard work yourself. I just reminded you of your strength. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. But I couldn't have done it without you. We survived together, and now we get to live fully, without fear. I nodded, feeling a profound sense of closure. Every struggle, every sleepless night, every tear and every battle had led to this moment, not just hers, but ours. In the months that followed, life settled into a harmonious rhythm. My consulting firm continued to grow, Sarah's art flourished, and her relationship strengthened into a loving, committed partnership. We continued our rituals, walks, painting, quiet dinners, nurturing not only our bond as sisters, but our own personal growth and happiness. It was in these quiet moments that I realized the true meaning of justice, empowerment, and resilience. Justice isn't always about retribution. It's about reclaiming your life and living it fully. Empowerment isn't always loud. It's in the quiet decisions, the steady progress, and the refusal to let fear dictate your path. And resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about rising, over and over, stronger each time. One evening, Sarah and I sat on the porch together, watching the sunset over the city skyline. The sky was a wash of oranges, pinks, and purples, and the air smelled faintly of blooming flowers. You know, Em, Sarah said softly, I used to think that happiness was something that happened to other people. But now I see it's something we create, together with care, courage, and honesty. I smiled, squeezing her hand. Exactly. And we've proven that, haven't we? Through everything. She nodded, resting her head on my shoulder. We have. And I'm grateful. For life, for love, and for you. I felt a deep warmth in my chest. And I'm grateful for you, Sarah. For your strength, your courage, and the fact that we survived it all. Together. Summer had settled fully, the days stretching long and golden. The city pulsed with life, and there was a certain warmth in the air that seemed to encourage growth, laughter, and possibility. After everything Sarah and I had endured, it felt almost surreal to live in a season that celebrated light and renewal. Every morning, as I opened the windows and let sunlight spill into my apartment, I felt the weight of the past lift just a little more. Sarah's life was thriving in ways that filled me with awe and pride. Her workshops with children were flourishing, attracting attention from neighboring communities, and she had begun collaborating with other artists on larger projects. Her relationship with her fiancé had deepened into one of trust, love, and mutual respect. Watching her navigate her life with grace and confidence was both inspiring and humbling. She had taken the lessons of our shared past, the betrayals, the fear, the heartbreak, and turned them into a blueprint for thriving, for building a life defined not by others' mistakes, but by her own choices. One morning, Sarah called me, her voice tinged with excitement. I've been invited to lead a citywide art program this fall. They want me to mentor young artists and host public exhibitions. It's huge, I smiled, pride swelling in my chest. That's incredible, Sarah. You've earned it. All those late nights, all that work, it's paying off. She laughed softly. And I couldn't have done it without you. You always pushed me to believe in myself when I doubted everything. I shook my head, smiling warmly. You pushed yourself. I just reminded you of who you really are. It was in these moments that I realized something profound. Empowerment wasn't about doing for someone else. It was about standing beside them, reminding them of their own strength, and giving them the courage to step into it fully. And Sarah had learned that lesson beautifully. Meanwhile, my consulting business had grown in both size and influence. The workshops I led, the mentorship programs I developed, and the speaking engagements I accepted all served to expand not only my professional footprint, but also my sense of purpose. Sharing my story, carefully and thoughtfully, became a way to guide others, particularly women navigating challenges similar to those Sarah and I had faced. One evening, after returning from a full day of mentoring sessions, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal by Michael, the fear and the sleepless nights, all of it, had been painful. But they had also been transformative. They had forced me to confront my own fears, to set boundaries, to cultivate resilience, and to claim my voice in a world that often tried to silence it. That reflection was interrupted by a knock at the door. Standing there was Denise, our longtime friend and confidant. She smiled warmly, holding a small package. I thought you might like this, she said, handing it over. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal, blank pages waiting to be filled. For your thoughts, your reflections, your next chapter, she said. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Thank you, Denise. This means a lot, she smiled, giving me a gentle hug. You've already written a powerful story. This is just the next chapter. Make it one you're proud of. That night I began writing. I wrote not just about the past, but about the present and the future. I wrote about survival, growth, empowerment, and love. I wrote about the quiet moments that mattered. The laughter with Sarah, the mentorship sessions, the simple rituals that grounded us. Each word felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had once been overshadowed by fear and betrayal. As the words flowed, I realized that storytelling itself was a form of justice. By putting our experiences into words, by sharing them thoughtfully, we created a record of truth. We turned pain into purpose, chaos into clarity, and fear into empowerment. In the weeks that followed, Sarah and I continued to embrace life fully. We hosted small gatherings, painting sessions, and walks through the city's parks. Each moment was infused with gratitude, reflection, and joy. The lessons we had learned about boundaries, trust, resilience, and love were now guiding our daily lives, shaping every decision and interaction. One afternoon, as we walked along the riverbank, Sarah turned to me with a thoughtful expression. Do you ever think about the past? About Michael? I nodded slowly. Of course I do, but I don't dwell on it anymore. It's a part of our story, yes, but it doesn't define us. It taught us what we needed to know, and now we're free to choose how our story continues. She smiled. I like that. Free to choose. That's exactly how it feels. That summer, a major opportunity came my way. A national organization invited me to speak at a conference focused on women's empowerment and leadership. The invitation felt like both recognition and responsibility. I spent weeks preparing, reflecting on the lessons Sarah and I had learned, and crafting a narrative that was honest, raw, and inspiring. The day of the conference arrived, and as I stepped onto the stage, I felt a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. Looking out at the audience, hundreds of women eager to learn, to grow, to be inspired, I felt the weight of responsibility, but also the thrill of purpose. I began speaking, sharing the story of our journey, the betrayal, the fear, the fight, and ultimately the triumph. I spoke of resilience, empowerment, and the importance of reclaiming one's life. As I shared the lessons we had learned, I watched nods, smiles, and tears ripple through the audience. It was a moment of profound connection, of shared understanding, of justice in its quiet, transformative form. After the speech, women approached me, sharing their own stories of struggle and survival. Some thanked me for validating their experiences, others for giving them hope. Each conversation reinforced what I had long known, that our lives, no matter how painful the past, have the power to inspire, guide, and heal others. I realized then that the ultimate justice we had achieved wasn't in punishing Michael or reliving our past. It was in living fully, boldly, and authentically. It was in creating a life that honored our experiences, our growth, and our values. That evening, returning home, I found Sarah waiting with a quiet smile. "How did it go?" she asked. I smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. It was incredible. The women, their stories, their courage, it reminded me why we fight, why we survive, why we reclaim our lives. It's not just about us. It's about inspiring others to do the same. She nodded, eyes shining. I'm so proud of you, Em, and I'm proud of us, of everything we've endured and achieved. We sat together in the quiet of the evening, the city lights twinkling outside, reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The past was a memory, the present was full of life and connection, and the future stretched ahead with promise and possibility. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's wedding plans intensified. She embraced the process with joy, creativity, and a sense of calm that had once been unimaginable. I remained by her side, guiding, supporting, and celebrating every step. Each detail, flowers, invitations, seating arrangements, was approached with care, mindfulness, and a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had led us here. The day before the wedding, we sat together in her apartment, surrounded by soft light and quiet anticipation. Em, she said, turning to me, do you realize how far we've come? From fear and betrayal to this happiness, this peace? I nodded, holding her hand. I do, and I'm grateful for every step, every struggle, every lesson. It all led us here, to this moment, together. As the night fell and the city grew quiet, I reflected on everything we had achieved: justice, empowerment, growth, and love. The shadows of the past had not disappeared entirely. They never fully do. But they had lost their power. We were free, resilient, and fully alive. And most importantly, we had each other, our bond stronger than ever. The morning of Sarah's wedding arrived with a sky so bright, it felt like the world itself was celebrating. Sunlight spilled across the streets, catching in the leaves of the trees and glinting off the city's glass towers. The air smelled faintly of fresh blooms from the neighborhood florist, and the world felt awake, alive, and expectant. I woke early, heart racing, not from nerves, but from the quiet thrill of witnessing something monumental. Today wasn't just about Sarah's marriage. It was about every triumph we had achieved together, the survival, the justice, the growth, and the love that had carried us to this day. Every challenge we had faced, every sleepless night, every tear and every fight had led to this moment. And now, finally, we could celebrate it. I arrived at Sarah's apartment where she was already surrounded by soft sunlight and the faint aroma of jasmine from a nearby vase. She looked radiant, a living embodiment of the resilience, strength, and grace she had cultivated over the years. Her dress flowed around her like liquid silk, simple yet elegant, mirroring the transformation of her life. Bold but refined, confident yet tender. "Em?" she whispered as I entered. "Thank you for being here. Today it feels perfect," I smiled, feeling warmth well up in my chest. "It's perfect because of you, Sarah. Because of your courage, your heart, and the love you've chosen to embrace fully. I'm honored to stand with you." As her maid of honor, I had my duties, of course, adjusting the veil, calming nerves, and keeping track of every small detail. But my role went deeper than that. I was witness to her journey, participant in her triumph, and guardian of the shared memories that had shaped us both. Every brush with fear we had survived, every betrayal we had overcome, had led to this moment of pure joy and celebration. The ceremony began in the afternoon, a soft breeze carrying petals across the courtyard. Friends and family gathered, smiling and laughing, their eyes reflecting the collective hope and love surrounding Sarah. When she walked down the aisle, radiant and assured, I felt tears sting my eyes. This was more than a wedding. It was a testament. It was a testament to resilience, to empowerment, to the power of reclaiming one's life after being hurt. During the vows, Sarah's voice was steady and clear, filled with authenticity. Her fiancé spoke with equal honesty, sharing promises grounded in trust, respect, and shared growth. I watched, breathless, as two people who had chosen love consciously, intentionally and without hesitation, sealed a union that was built on strength, mutual care, and understanding. When the officiant pronounced them married, the air seemed to shift. Laughter and applause erupted, petals flew, and I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, pride, and joy. The shadows of the past, Michael's lies, the fear, the doubt, felt distant, almost irrelevant. Today was a celebration of life, love, and triumph over adversity. Later at the reception, we shared stories, danced, and laughed until our cheeks ached. Sarah's friends and family marveled at the bond we shared, often commenting on the quiet strength that had carried us both through everything. And in the midst of it all, I realized something profound. Our journey was not just about surviving, it was about thriving, living fully, and using every lesson as a stepping stone toward something better. At one point, Sarah pulled me aside, holding my hands in hers. "Em, do you realize what this day represents?" she asked softly. I nodded. "It's more than a wedding. It's the culmination of everything we've endured, the celebration of every battle we've won, and the proof that resilience pays off." She smiled through tears. "And it's a reminder that even when life tries to break you, you can choose to rise, to love, and to flourish. Thank you for standing beside me through it all." After the festivities, I stepped outside to take a moment for myself. The city lights glimmered like stars, the air carried the faint scent of evening blooms, and a gentle breeze reminded me of how far we had come. I reflected on the path that had led us here, the betrayal that had once consumed our lives, the fear that had threatened to paralyze us, and the strength we had discovered in ourselves and each other. Justice had been served, not through confrontation, but through resilience, truth, and empowerment. Our lives were no longer dictated by the shadow of deceit. They were guided by the choices we made, the love we cultivated, and the courage we nurtured. That night, back at my apartment, I sat with a journal in hand and began writing once more. I wrote about the wedding, the laughter, the tears of joy, and the profound sense of closure that now filled my life. I wrote about empowerment, the beauty of reclaiming one's narrative, and the importance of standing firm in your truth. As I wrote, I realized that the ultimate gift of our journey was the knowledge that life could be beautiful even after pain. We had proven that resilience could transform sorrow into strength, betrayal into insight, and fear into liberation. Over the following weeks, Sarah and I continued to embrace life fully. Her art continued to thrive, reaching wider audiences and touching more lives. My consulting work expanded, giving me opportunities to guide others through challenges I had faced firsthand. We maintained our traditions, walks in the park, evening painting sessions, quiet dinners, each moment infused with gratitude, reflection, and joy. One evening, as we sat together on the porch, watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about the past?" I shook my head slowly. I do sometimes, but only to remember the lessons it taught us. The pain is gone, the wisdom remains. And now, we get to live fully, freely, and intentionally. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder, and we'll keep growing together. I squeezed her hand. Always together. The city around us seemed to pulse with possibility, as if celebrating our journey alongside us. I realized then that life's challenges, no matter how harsh, are opportunities in disguise, chances to reclaim your voice, define your path, and embrace love, joy, and fulfillment. Our story was proof of that. Two sisters, bound by blood, struggle, and unwavering support, who had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into insight, and fear into courage. And now, I want to speak directly to you. Watching this story unfold, life will challenge you. People may disappoint you, circumstances may feel impossible. But know this, you have the power to rise. You have the strength to reclaim your life, to seek justice in whatever form it may take, and to flourish despite every obstacle. Just like Sarah and I did. Just like countless others who have faced darkness and emerged stronger. Your story matters. Your resilience matters. And your ability to thrive is waiting for you to claim it. Stories. Her heart holds. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story inspired you, uplifted you, or reminded you of the power within yourself, I'd love for you to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Which moment of this story resonated with you the most? And remember, no matter what challenges you face, your strength and courage can guide you to a brighter, empowered future.